Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingsare. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. Thanks to BizSimply for sponsoring this episode as our show partner. And BizSimply is the all-in-one HR, workforce management, rota and operations software designed and built by hospitality experts to make every shift run like clockwork. And we join forces to help the industry to find new ways to become even more innovative in how we lead our people, how we operate, to how we grow our businesses, to how we serve our customers. Together we want to share strategies and tools that can make the industry thrive long term, not just survive.
We decided to be a good business, but it was in the process of trying to do that stuff, I was very, very aware that without some kind of greater depth of compassion and empathy and love and humility within me, then it was going to peter out, run out of energy, and it wouldn't go anywhere. So I think the further we go down this journey, the more we as leaders need to embody some of those, what some people might call more spiritual things and changes within us that will make us not only a better person, but a much better business leader as well.
This is Paul Hargreaves, CEO at Cotswold Fayre and Flourish. He's also the author of 2 inspirational books, Forces for Good and The Fourth Bottom Line. He's also a B Corp Ambassador, and he often speaks to leaders who want to change the world through better businesses. And it was a huge honor to have Paul here as a guest. His businesses are a great example of how you can actually build a business that's financially sound, but also makes a positive impact on the world. And in this conversation, we talk about purpose, business as a force for good, culture and compassionate leadership, Paul's learnings about growth when you're building a heart-centered business, and what the biggest challenges are when you're building a purpose-driven organizations. He's learning from transferring cultures to new ventures and how you grow yourself as a founder and how you keep reinventing yourself as the business mature. Before you tune in, please sign up for our weekly newsletter, Maverick Talk, that is packed with more Maverick insights, strategies, and tools. You will find the link in the show notes or visit hospitalitymavericks.com. Now, grab your notebook. This is a masterclass in building a heart-centered business. Enjoy. Today we should be talking about 2 subjects that's so critical, I believe, for the future of business. It's actually having business as a driver for good, a force for good, as our guest talks about today, and also how you're actually going to create that business without the right kind of leadership approach. So we're going to dive into that today. And today's guest, Paul, I met the first time on another podcast I was listening into. So I was running in the hills here behind where I live. And he was talking on the Hungry podcast. And he was talking about, creating businesses for good. And Paul runs a business, two different business, both a food business, but also a wholesale business. And he was one of the first B Corp businesses here in the UK. And it's so interesting to hear actually somebody that writes about it and talk about it that's actually practiced it. And I think therefore I've really been excited about having you here on the show today, Paul. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Looking forward to this.
Paul, for people who haven't, heard about you before and what you do, could you just give like a, your elevator pitch? Because it's quite an incredible journey you've been on and what you're passionate about.
Okay, I think probably most people haven't heard of me, but I wear a few hats, so this may take a couple of minutes. But the main business is a company called Cotswold Fayre, and we are a wholesaler of specialty food and drink. We supply between about 1,500 and 2,000 independent retailers in the UK. As you mentioned, we were one of the first B Corps in the UK, and we'll no doubt explain what that is later on. They're basically businesses that are existing for people and planet, not just profits. So I'm also an ambassador for that movement because I think it's incredibly important and it is the future of business, and we're going to be in trouble unless more businesses go in that direction really quickly. So on to the back of that, I do quite a bit of speaking to other businesses to encourage them to head in that direction. That's what I've been doing this week mainly, actually. And then we've also got a food hall and restaurant, which is where I am today. This is set up last year, and that's been a great experiment, actually, of putting in some of the stuff that I've learned over the last 22 years in a brand new business with no people that were in the wholesale business, in effect starting again and doing things a lot better than we did right at the start of the wholesale business. And it's been a great experiment on actually, can we prioritize absolutely people and planet and still have a very successful business? And fortunately, the answer seems to be yes.
That's absolutely amazing news. You also, you said you were a speaker, but you're also author of two books. You've written about your learning, so you could share with other people.
Yes, so first book was Forces for Good, which is really just what I just said. It's looking at businesses that are putting people and planet before profits. And coming out of the first book, I kind of realized that if we're really going to do that, if we're really going to act as business leaders with compassion and love, then we actually need to change ourselves as well as trying to change the world. So the second book's called The Fourth Bottom Line, which is, in some ways you've got people, planet, profits, and it is not a P, but personal change, we could say. And I've been very, very aware in my journey that if I'm going to really do this properly, I need to change as a person, as a leader, and get away from some of the bad examples of leadership that we are taught probably in business schools in the Western world.
What about your wholesale business has been around for some time, and the interesting thing is that you didn't start in business. You started, when I read the book, you started in charity, and you would think about doing good. You were already starting out in the right place.
Yes, so it really was a business that was probably I was a reluctant entrepreneur, if you like, because I've always been passionate about reversing injustice, and that's something that, as a business, we've come back to strongly in the last few years. So yeah, you're right. It was probably, I think, about 13 years in the charitable sector, working in the inner city in London, a poor part of the country with lots of deprivation and need. And yeah, worked in a team there dealing with people in prison, um, people on drugs, a lot of poverty, and horrendous social situations. Ran out of money, so started selling food and drink to delis in London as they were on my doorstep, and just happened in some ways to be in the right place at the right time. It was just at the time, 1999, we started, was just when the specialty food was becoming a thing, and in effect, the charity stuff got smaller, the business got bigger over the next few years, and obviously that's what I'm doing 100% of the time now. Now, the interesting thing was, probably for the first, well, almost the first half of the business, I was still a bit of a reluctant business person. I probably, in some ways, my heart was in Africa or Asia, running an orphanage for kids, and I hadn't really grasped the sense that business could really be an agent to change the world. Even though we had actually started we employed, of our first 5 employees, we had an ex-drug addict, recovering alcoholic, and someone just out of prison. So right at the start of the business, I say we because there was another guy doing it with me initially. So we had something right, but I hadn't really grasped the potential of good businesses to make a massive transformational difference in the world. That probably came about 10 years after I started. So my heart was half in it, probably, for the first half of the business. And now, obviously, I'm absolutely convinced that good businesses can actually make the biggest difference in the world. In fact, the charity stuff is really mopping up the mess that governments and businesses have left behind by not doing things well. So if we can do things well as businesses, we're reducing the need for charities to come in and bail the situation out.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because your whole business philosophy has built on that, and you also got the results. Like you built one of the, the most impactful businesses in fine food, but also you are one of the probably top wholesalers. So actually, you're proven that doing good actually is connected with business results.
Yeah, and obviously with there's always other reasons for our success, but yeah, for sure. I mean, we are in a lucky position as a wholesaler because we can have a big influence on lots of other businesses. We've got 450 suppliers, and as I said, 1,500 odd customers. So we can, if we say stuff, people listen. And we're very pleased that we've been able to influence a lot of other food and drink businesses through our work, and that's one of the reasons why there are actually more B Corp businesses within the food and drink sector than any other sector in the UK. It's not all down to us by any means. There's companies like Cook and Ella's Kitchen have also been very loud voices, but we've added our voice to theirs.
And you talk about, and you mentioned to me in the beginning that we have a critical, we have maybe had that for decades, but right now we are such a critical point around the challenges of the world. The UN have the 17 goals and so on. And you're really an advocate for business to get involved. Are you seeing that movement? And you talk about in your books, are you really seeing it happen? Or is it that something us that's really passionate about it and want to do it get a bit blinded?
Yeah, I think there's been massive steps forward in particularly during COVID, so the last couple of years. Um, Maybe not so much before that. I think there's a greater awareness now from businesses that actually, if they're going to be successful, they need to be acting on social and environmental issues because consumers, business customers, more and more are making decisions to buy from companies that are doing good. And I think that's changed a lot during COVID. It's obviously being influenced by the Gen Y and Gen Z in particular, who are making those sustainable choices a lot more than the older generation. So yes, there is a big movement in the right direction, but also there's still a hell of a long way to go. And not many corporate businesses are acting for any other reason than making their shareholders more wealthy than they already are. So, if we're really going to see change, we probably will need legislation at some point and force businesses to do the right thing. But that might not be for a few years yet.
You talk about as well that, that journey of building this more, impactful, heart centered business. Is there like, can you share what has your learning been doing in that way? Because it doesn't sound like, it's never easy to build a business, but there must have been other challenges at the time you did it. You didn't do it now, you done it over a 30-year period.
Yeah, it's not quite 30 years. I'm not that old, but yeah. So just to back to that story. So there was some good DNA at the company right at the beginning. Then my business partner left after a couple of years. And to be honest with you, for about 8 years, yeah, I was immersed in just trying to have a financially stable business, normal startup situation of not having enough money to pay the wages on various occasions and having to I actually borrowed some money from my dad one 1 month so I could pay the wages. It's all a bit embarrassing. But after about 10 years, we were a lot more sustainable on the financial side. And that's the point at which let's get back to what we originally started to do here and make a positive difference in the world. So I wrote to a number of food charities, actually, as we were a food business, saying, okay, what can we come and help you in any way? Happy to give you money and raise money, but we also want to get our hands dirty. I wrote to 3 or 4 food charities in the UK. None of them were interested in having us help them. And I didn't just want to give money to charity. That's a bit boring. But so I then remembered a project in Kenya that some friends of mine were involved in, and thought, well, maybe this could be something we could get involved in. Went over there with my daughter in 2011. Was absolutely blown away by the poverty there. I don't think I'd ever been to a place where people literally had nothing. I mean, some of them didn't even have shoes on their feet. So very, very humbling, very transformational for my daughter as well. Getting emotional thinking about it. And came back into the business and for 2 weeks couldn't talk about it without crying. When I've finally pulled myself together, did talk about it, said, look, let's do something to help. I don't know how many were there in the company at the time, maybe 30-ish, I guess. And someone put their hand up and said, work part-time, said, in the 2 days I don't work for you, I will organise a charity ball and raise some money, and then we can do something. So that's what happened. And we had our first ball and raised about £25,000. And with that money, I actually started a farm over in Kenya. But the interesting thing was, and some of this is from hindsight, but having something other than our normal business activities, some kind of good that we were doing, really energized people in the business, and it brought a new dynamic for people to turn up to work in the morning because they knew, great, we're involved in something really good here. So it put a new spring in people's step, and absolutely, that's been a massive factor in our business ever since. People, I want people that work for us to come to work, A, enjoy it, but B, also know that they're doing some good from turning up, even though they may be doing a routine job. They know from them being there, they're actually achieving something big by being part of our company. And I think if you've got that, you obviously get great people to work for you. They tend to stay working for you longer than average, and it adds a fantastic dynamic to the business, and that actually makes people personally happier and more fulfilled too.
And looking back, has this become, by accidental, a way of you to build culture and a better experience for your employees as well, doing projects that's outside what you normally would do in a business?
Yeah, so the B Corp framework has been really, really helpful in this. So for those that don't know, the B Corp is, you go through a very long certification process, and mainly in 5 areas: governance, community, environment, workers, and customers. So through the assessment, you see the points that you get, and you've got to get over a certain number of points, but you also see what you're not doing. And there was a lot that we're not doing, there still is. So the best thing I ever did in terms of getting that culture embedded in the business was to set up what we called, very unoriginal name, we set up change groups. So we had an internal environmental change group, we had an external one which mainly focused on changing our suppliers. We had a workers group, and later on we had a community group, and then we had an innovation group. And the only rule with these groups was no one on the leadership team could be in them. So the idea was they generated, right, how can we as a business be better in those different areas? And then they came back with generally good ideas, and we put them into practice. And I think that changed us from being, from the good ideas coming from top down, if you like, to the good ideas being emerging from everyone in the company. And generally a lot of businesses make the mistake where they don't allow good ideas to come from anything other than the senior leadership team, which is wrong on all sorts of levels. But yeah, that and it's not, it didn't happen overnight. It probably took 2.5 years for that kind of process to change. And after that, there was a different dynamic in the business, and more people were engaged in what we were doing. And the kind of proof of the pudding on that, if you like, we do an impact report every year, which says this is what we've done in the last year, both on a business level and community and environment and everything else. And now, when I get that impact report, and I'm just about to see the proof of this year's last year's. At looking through those pages, most of the good things we've done aren't me. A lot of the good things we've done aren't even the leadership team. They're just other people in the business that have taken the initiative and done some great stuff, which was really pleasing and energizing for me as a business leader.
Yeah, so in a way, you drive the framework, but the initiatives are in a way driven by the employees and what they find.
Yeah, and the B Corp community is helpful as well. We very unashamedly nick, steal, and borrow ideas from other companies that are doing things better than us, and likewise, I'm sure other companies steal our good ideas too. So yeah, I mean that's probably one reason I wrote Forces for Good. Really, was to kind of propagate some of these good ideas more into the business community that maybe some people didn't know about.
Yeah, and your fourth bottom line, if we just go to the other book as well, and we talk about culture here, you in a way say that's where it starts. It starts with the leader or the leaders in the business really working on themselves to create this kind of force for good.
I think both go to. I think you've got to have the intention to do good, and that's a mind thing. Make a decision to be a business as a force for good. That's definitely the way it went in my case. We decided to be a good business, but it was in the process of trying to do that stuff. I was very, very aware that without some kind of greater depth of compassion and empathy and love and humility within me, then it was going to peter out, run out of energy, and it wouldn't go anywhere. So I think the more we do, when the further we go down this journey, the more we as leaders need to embody some of those, what some people might call more spiritual things and changes within us that will make us not only a better person, but a much better business leader as well.
What about as you as the CEO and founder of the business, as you had to change yourself, and I guess you have to evolve all the time. But what has been one of the biggest challenges for yourself going from a traditional mindset around how to run business to be a force for good? What has you felt was the toughest bit to get around?
Well, I hope everyone doesn't go through this, but I had a really traumatic 5 years of my life in some ways. The business was, it was okay to some degree, but my first marriage split up. The business almost ended in 2014. Won't go into the details, but we put in a new computer system which almost killed everything we were doing. It's quite a common story. And then soon after that, I actually ended up being in the back of an ambulance with malaria on my way to hospital. So I think for me, and I think this is true for quite a few people. I think there was certain elements of my ego that need to be stripped away. My identity was probably too much in what I was doing rather than who I was. And those kind of difficult times, I think, helped strip all that away and, a lot of those, it was a horrible time in many ways. But now looking back on it, all those three things were very good for me and have made me a better, more compassionate leader. And interestingly, I do think failure is actually important. Most people who are successful have been through at least one failure. In fact, chairman of FTSE 250 companies these days are looking for CEOs who have had failure, because it makes them more resilient and makes them a better, stronger leader, probably more vulnerable as well for the future. And I think that's definitely what makes good leaders. It's people who are probably doing less and being a bit more.
Yeah, and it's interesting with vulnerability. It's actually okay don't to have the answer, not to have the answer, and in a way you said that the employees have the answers. Let's go and give them the opportunity to come up with these answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and being being vulnerable, it does get talked about quite a bit these days. But I used to be a leader where I thought my job was to be strong. Even when things was going wrong, to pretend everything was okay. And there's a certain element that I think you don't want to get all your dirty washing out in front of the people that work for you, but also you need to be vulnerable, because people are people need to know that the leaders of their business or organizations are actually human beings. And if they've got this mask of pretension on all the time, that's not very human. So if you are free as a leader to cry in meetings, which has happened to me on several occasions, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad leader. It means people probably then actually trust you more than they did before. So yeah, just men particularly can learn quite a lot in this area, I think.
Yeah, it's super interesting you say that, because I was thinking about my younger version as well, where I was quite, I would say, quite elite soldier mindset in my role as a leader. That had to look strong, always optimistic, finding the way, and probably more into what I was doing than being in principle. And my whole identity was wrapped up in that job.
You're spot on, and that is a Western disease. This absolute obsession with productivity and activity, and we can learn a huge amount from Asia, particularly on this kind of stuff. And I've spent some time in India and learnt a lot from there. But we just don't stop enough. We headless chickens running around. If only we stopped more, sat back, reflected, we would make better decisions. We would run better businesses. I mean, I build into my diary generally at least half a day a week just to sit, reflect, maybe read a bit, um, go for a walk, possibly. And people, he's not doing anything. Well, I am. I'm being a leader, and you know, I probably achieve a lot more now from doing a lot less than I used to, because it's better activity, having given some time to the more intuitive and reflective side of us.
And it comes a bit back to your book, where you're the fourth bottom line, where you in principle give people a practic challenge over. You probably can remember how many days it is. I'm just looking it up here. 50 days. 50 days. A new word every day, like compassion or patient, and so on. And what was you thinking about putting those out? The word build with a quote, and then for you to read your reflections and then go away and reflect self. Is that how you done it yourself? Is that been your unconscious way of becoming a better leader, a more compassionate leader?
Yes, I think some of those words have kind of built up in me over the years. So all the words, they're all characteristics of what I would say a good leader is. And there was originally going to only be 31. I thought one for each day of the month, but they kept coming. It ended up as being 50, and I probably had to stop at that point. But I did do I did put out. I got quite a lot of LinkedIn connections, and I put out a post on LinkedIn. Basically, I'm writing this book on 50 characteristics of good leadership. Give me one, and I had a massive response actually, and all the responses I got, which was over 100, were all covered in the book, apart from one, and it was the word magnanimous, which I didn't really know what it meant. So I had to look it up, but it was kind of it's kind of forgiving benevolence is the meaning of that word, and I've covered those in other chapters anyway. So yes, I think there probably is a general awareness of what good leadership is. It's just that we don't really reflect on it enough because we're too busy doing stuff. So the idea of the book is to sit down at the start of each day and just give yourself 10 minutes to think, yes, I can be kinder today, for example. And then give people some exercises they can do to put kindness into practice on that particular day.
And that's one thing I think I would share with the audience is that I read the book and I followed Paul's recommendation. I maybe read 2 chapters some days. But actually, there were some things where I found out, I thought I was not busy, but I actually found out I had to stop doing. And actually, it made me really, really think about some things. And again, the thing is that you can keep coming back to these things because you're never done. That's not like you're not done training this. This is you know,
Now I'm still reading the book myself, of course, and trying to do the exercises. Yeah.
I think personally that this is a great book for many to get started on if they want to do some transformation because it starts with you, as you said, and not the business. It starts with you, and the rest that follows. Um, you talk a lot about also that there was in the book, there's been a transformation in society. There's more focusing on this, but what did the pandemic do, and what kind of learnings did you have as a CEO founder of a business? Because everybody was impacted somehow. Some had really good business, other was challenging business, other was challenging in private life. Everybody had an experience out of this.
Yeah. What did I learn? I think two things that stop us being the kind of whole people that we're meant to be, um, and one is connection with people, and the other is connection with nature. And I think this happened widely across the world, really, through the pandemic. People realised how important it was to connect with others because when they were cut off from other people, they valued their friends and family more. And actually, we we made some really close friends during the pandemic in our village, which those relationships have been a real strength to myself and my wife, and also the connection with nature. Um, Again, a lot of us live in cities. I've lived in cities most of my life, Manchester, and then London. Now I live in the countryside. But, we've lost that connection with nature, which, Homo sapiens has been around for hundreds of thousands of years. And we've only really lived in cities for about the last, well, 5,000 years, probably, cities and towns. So we've lost that connection that just brings life to us. And a lot of people rediscovered that during the pandemic, didn't they? They didn't really have anything to do but go for walks, and people were saying because there was no traffic, people noticed the birds singing for the first time, and yeah, I think if we could relearn connecting with people in a deep way, not just a superficial way, and deeply connecting with nature, I think we would be transformed by those two things.
Do you think we kept on to those good things? Of course, everything slides when reality kicks in and the busyness starts, if we should use your word.
Yes, probably not in some cases, but I think people have to some degree. I was at a trade event last week, which is the first big trade show since the pandemic, and there was so much connection going on. People really, really pleased to see each other, and I think you appreciate the relationships you have a lot more, don't you, when you haven't had them? It's like fasting. If you haven't had food for a while, you really enjoy it when you can eat again. So yeah, hopefully some of it stayed, but the danger is, of course, the massive focus on productivity might squeeze it out again.
Yeah, and it's like almost like the good stuff, the productivity can almost become the enemy because we all know when we open our email or whatever it had, there's like lots of productivity tips, and that's what we're talking about. How do we squeeze more out of the minute?
Well, actually, you're more productive if you turn your email off for most of the day, which is what I do. And I encourage my team to do it. So I think some of this is about, we're certainly in the business context, it's about building habits into your business. So, for example, in many of our meetings, we actually have a period of complete quiet at the beginning, maybe do some breathing exercises, put some music on sometimes. I did actually bring in a meditation bell to the last board meeting, which a couple of people found a bit weird. But yeah, and I think that putting in those pauses into your day is actually really, really helpful. I think you generally have better meetings, and then didn't finish it. So we have a period of quiet, and then we do a check-in. So we ask people in the room, how are you feeling today? Tell us in 2 or 3 words. And sometimes, they expand that. But you're getting more of the whole person in the meeting because if they're feeling crap, they'll say nothing wrong with that. And then you're also helping them to lay aside all the stuff they're thinking about and actually bring their whole selves into the meeting. And I think you have probably shorter, better meetings if you put in habits like that. And it's just good for us to put those pauses into our day, isn't it?
I love that you made it like a ritual because then everybody, if they forget, get paused at some point.
Yeah, yeah. So my meetings, I always do that, and I know the other leaders in the business do it in theirs too. So it just kind of then passes down, doesn't it?
But what about yourself? Because you run, you're doing speaking, you're involved in quite a lot of things. You write books. How do you show up pro and talking about productivity or being balanced with yourself? You have your half a day where you really take time for yourself for some hours out every week. What else did you do?
I don't do much really. Well, I realised a few years ago probably not that good at most things, but I'm quite good at finding good people to do things I'm not very good at. So that's really my main focus is to just look after the good people I've got and check they're happy and doing what they're good at. Culture, really, that's the main thing I work on is just making sure the culture of the business is maintained. And that was probably one of the biggest challenges last year was we set up this food hall and restaurant here in near Bristol. And could we replicate what we'd already had without any of the same people? Start again and get that culture right from the beginning. And fortunately, the answer is yes. We've got some great people working here. They absolutely get what we're doing. They're thoroughly committed to it, and it's actually a really easy job to help maintain and build that culture.
Yeah, and also because it's such a different business model as well. Of course, the food is the shared element, but again, it's a very different business model.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is actually, so in danger of getting emotional again. I found myself, and not just me actually, there's some other people, we found ourselves getting quite emotional when we were here, which doesn't happen in the wholesale business. And it's almost like, because this is a consumer-facing business, it's almost the kind of picture that came to mind when I was thinking about this was, the wholesale business is very, a lot of stuff goes on there. We move, I think, nearly 2 million boxes a year. So a lot happens. It's like the body and the legs and the arms all moving frantically. And it's almost like the consumer-facing side of the business, which is Flourish, it's almost like that was the face. So you can almost see into the business as a whole through here. And it's, in some ways, it's a bit obvious, because if you're dealing direct with consumers, you're kind of out there a lot more. But it was interesting, when my kids came to visit. One of my oldest lives in the States, so he was over last year, and his brother and sister came with him, and it's almost like they finally got what I've been doing all these years. They've been in the business, they've been helped in the warehouse at weekends in the past, and some of them have done work placements in the office. But coming here and actually seeing how happy the people were that worked here, it almost helped them understand what I've been doing for the last 22 years. So he said, Dad, the people here seem really happy. It's amazing. It's not like anywhere else we've been. Oh, yeah, good. Well done.
That's like, the proof point, because your kid says the truth, don't they? That
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
was there like any steps you could share in how because you started from scratch, and there's a lot of leaders to think, no, the recent business the business I'm in now, we can't change. It's all embedded in the culture, the ritual is so hard. But like, was there some steps that came really clear for you when you do this culture?
Well, getting the right leadership team is clearly the biggest one. So that was my main focus, was to get 6 people who could really propagate what we were doing. And actually, once they started, we then basically we didn't let them really do anything for a week. Put them in a room together and did some stuff with them, with some people that have helped us with the business, Andrew and Eudora, and they basically worked on their inner stuff for a week, and helping them to get to know each other, obviously, but also get to know themselves and to work out what more about themselves. And yeah, that was a great. I think I wasn't in the room, but there was lots of tears and lots of depth going on, which then was a great foundation for doing what we've achieved since. So, and then they, as I said before, most of the team here are under 35, some a lot younger, and they get this stuff probably better than old people like me anyway. So
It's super interesting. That it's quite brave as well, because if you told most leaders you need to put a new leadership team, to get in a room and start talking about the inner stuff, it would almost be, you know where I'm coming from now. It would almost be like that they will almost resign if they had to do that, because that's just, you're going too far now. I'm thinking about my old past in a very corporate environment. I could see that. I will be very excited about it, but I think but it's so interesting, and it's actually interesting as well as a new generation comes into leadership positions. Actually, that's why maybe also where we have a chance really to accelerate business for good.
yeah, I mean, none of those people were from a corporate background, actually, but there's 2 or 3 people who are in the wholesale business who, when we started introducing this stuff, they would absolutely admit it. They were pretty skeptical about it. In fact, one of them was very skeptical about it, because I know about some conversations he had with other people. But having been in it for a while, he's now actually one of the strongest advocates for all this stuff. In fact, we've got, we work with a logistics company, so we outsourced our logistics about 5 or 6 years ago, and the company we work with now that do all our warehousing and deliveries. They're actually going through this program at the moment. Now, they will be the only logistics company in the probably in the UK, certainly very kind of masculine macho world, and yet they're doing this stuff in their leadership team currently, and that's as a result of Dave, who was skeptical about it to start with, but he's now one of the biggest advocates of it because he's seen the difference it makes.
And it's super interesting. You're actually now impacting, not just your customers, but your suppliers, and they are taking some of these practices. That must be a massive satisfaction because you're talking about building better businesses.
Yeah, and they've seen our success. I guess we've more than doubled the business in the last 2 years. So when you can see that actually this stuff works, it adds a bit more weight to your voice anyway, doesn't it?
It seems like you are quite on top of what you're doing, Paul. But I have to ask you this question: the universe always keep on putting a challenge in front of us, no matter what. We never learn. It knocks us over one time after the other. What is yours?
Well, currently, the economic climate in the UK currently is not a great one. So we've had fabulous 2 years, growing at 50% both of those years. I don't think that'll happen this year. It's going to be more challenging. And yeah, but I think if you hold lightly the good times, it enables you to be more resilient in the less good times. So even if we do have less good times this year, then I don't think we're not going to lose faith in what we're doing at all. So yeah, that's probably the first thing that comes to mind with that question right now.
And that leads me actually to the next thing I wanted to ask you. So, what do you think the future holds then for you guys? You launch your food business or your restaurant and food business last year, the food hall. You have the wholesale business. Any other businesses you want to explore? And what is the next 5 years? What is the vision in principle? That's the question, probably.
So in the wholesale business, our vision would be to be better in tech, because I think that's the way things are going to go. We need to, we need to let our tech catch up with the rest of us, and I think if we lead in tech, we will continue to lead the sector. So that's a big one, and growth as a wholesaler is actually okay. I mean, I don't believe in GDP growth. Actually, I think we probably need to shrink. But as a wholesaler, because we're consolidating and because we're providing food and drink, which people need to live, growth for us is actually okay because it's reducing the amount of vehicles on the road and therefore reducing carbon, and we're planning on being fully electric on all our delivery by 2030 anyway. In terms of Flourish, I'm currently looking at a window there, which is our next phase, which is a gift shop and a wellness centre. We've got lots more room behind where there are some disused buildings, which we will refurbish and repurpose. And we're also looking at potential second Flourish site as well somewhere else. That's probably enough to be going on with for, for the next few
It
years.
sounds like I'm maintaining what you have. Well, that's super interesting, Paul. What is you ask these questions to people yourself, but what leader or business leader do you admire? Because you must have got your inspiration from somewhere.
Yeah. So okay. So that's the reason I actually wrote the fourth bottom line, is because it's an interview question I always ask, and I very rarely get a good answer, is who has most inspired you in your life? And I'd say, excluding family members, so stop them saying their mum and dad. Nothing wrong with that. But who else has inspired you? And there's very rarely a good answer to that question. So simple thing here is we need more inspiring leaders for sure, because it's sad that not enough people can give a good answer to that question. I mean, the person I most admire as a leader and probably can teach more to business leaders than any business book would be Nelson Mandela. I found his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, one of the most transformational books I've ever read, and a lot of the material in the fourth bottom line is from his example. If more business leaders learnt more from someone like him, I think we'd have a lot better businesses around. In terms of business as a force for good, there's a friend of mine called Ed Perry who was a co-founder of the business called Cook, which supplies remarkable food for your freezer. um, and he was the one that first introduced me to B Corp, so I would have to thank him enormously for that as well.
Super interesting, yeah, because normally people would, and you say that, I think I read that in one of your books or maybe one of your podcasts I listened to, you talk about most people will say Richard Branson or some kind of, really, really, top corporate entrepreneur. And often people actually forget the leaders they're working with in the day-to-day level. And I can still remember I think it was my second business manager as I worked for McDonald's, Hans Eek. He's the one that has had like the most impact for me to become a better version of myself and leader, because I was probably a bit too relaxed, a bit too arrogant in a way. I was thinking I was faster and better than everyone. And he said, if you want to be a real leader and you want to be a leader in my restaurant, you need to start working on yourself and just be a little bit less loud. And that was like a game changer. And I can remember that's one of the leaders that I had that admired me. And he said, you're never done learning. It's never a waste of time to learn, no matter what you learn.
If only there were more people in kitchens like him. It's they're not normally like that, are they? Yeah, I mean, if you put me on the spot, I would probably say a teacher I had at primary school actually who invested a huge amount of time in me and another guy in the same class, and he probably helped my love of nature. He used to go out in bird watching and deer stalking and things like that. So yeah, and teachers are remarkably influential and can be massively inspiring. So I was actually talking at a head teachers conference this week, which was an absolute privilege because you just know in that room how many people can they influence. It's thousands, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, my daughter is a teacher, so I'm slightly biased, but I think teachers are probably massively undervalued and should be looked up to as inspirational leaders too.
So Paul, to wrap up thing here in the end, I just want to ask you a couple more questions, and the first one is that what is the one question you wished I've asked you, and what would you have answered?
So it's a question that I have been asked before. It's what is the biggest lesson you've learned in your business career? My answer, well, probably two answers to this. One is as soon as you can, get the best people you can because good people will, or if you have to pay them more, they will always save you the extra that you might pay them. In the early days of a business, it's easy to, well, I can't really afford that good person because things are tight. Da 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 da. No, take them on anyway, and they will always pay for themselves. The second answer to that question is, and the times I've made my biggest mistakes, actually, three occasions that come to mind, is when I haven't gone with my gut or instinct. I've let other people persuade me that a certain course of action was the right one when it wasn't. And deep down, I kind of knew it was the wrong thing to do, but I let myself be persuaded by other people. So they're probably the two. Get great people and go with your gut.
I love that, Paul, and I especially love that one because that's also one I've experienced myself. It's I think I read a book. I think it's Good to Great. It says it's not what you pay, it's who you pay. And it says this very well in a way. And I think often, especially in smaller businesses and startup businesses, we often forget that because we get so focused on survival sometimes. But actually, sometimes you need these people in to really lift you out of survival mode. Where can people find out more about you, the businesses you're involved in, and how can they connect with it?
So my personal website is paulhargreaves.co.uk, which is my kind of speaking and writing side. The wholesale business is Cotswold Fayre, Fayre.co.uk, and the retail business Flourish is flourish at glenavon.co.uk.
Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us, talking about business as a force for good, and also talk about how we change to a more compassionate leadership style to make a better future.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Wow, amazing, Paul. Really enjoyed this conversation. Great to learn practically how you start building a business that makes profit and impact at the same time. You should now reflect on how you can ensure that your business gives more than it takes. And to get further inspiration on how to build a more purpose-driven business, tune in to episode 9 of Hospitality in the Infinite Game, where David and I talk about net positive. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share, rate, review, or subscribe to one of our channels, which all can be done via the website hospitalitymavericks.com. A big thank you to BizSimply for supporting us, bring great insights, strategies, and tools to help the industry thrive, not just survive. Check them out at bizsimply.com or via their social at BizSimply or BizSimplyHQ. You can also email them directly at advice@bizsimply.com. A big thank you to Fina Charlton, who's the show producer and editor from the podcast collective. Tune in next time for another interview. And in the meantime, find out more about us and subscribe to the newsletter to get more Maverick insights at hospitalitymavericks.com. And don't worry, if you didn't get all of this, there will be links in the show notes. I'm Michael Tingsa, and you've been listening to the Hospitality Maverick podcast show. Be Maverick.